With my good friend Eddie Gunn today.
Hello.
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 Um, wow. We've known each other for
About 31 years. I mean, I've been living in,
Yeah.
well,
I don't think we met each other that long, but it's been a good while.
25 anyway,
Yeah,
when
yeah.
Marie started playing at Legends.
That's
Not
true.
Legends, that coffee shop, Java Joe's.
Yeah.
She used to play on a Wednesday night. And I went there one time and met her, became a fan, and you were already there as a fan, you and Mary.
Mm-hmm.
And then I met you again at UU, and I said, "Where do I know you from? Are you a cop?" He said, "Yes, I'm a cop, but I know you from Marie." I said, "Oh, Marie Reed, one of the best singer-songwriters in this area." And we were both groupies.
And you were a police officer too.
I was a cop on Long Island, New York, yeah. Baldwin, New York.
Well, what years were you working up there?
Well, I went into the academy in 1969 in October, and I was assigned to the radio room at Communications Bureau and headquarters for my first 7 years. And I was infamous, you might say, in that location. And a guy wanted to date one of the girls I was working with in the Communications Bureau. She was a 9/11 operator. And he said, "Would you come to the first precinct?" Which was a pretty good place for camaraderie. I didn't know that much about it, but I said, "I guess so." So 7 years. In 1977, I wound up working at the first precinct, where I also became infamous. And I was there for 17 years, mostly in the town called Baldwin, where the precinct was located. And somewhat, every time I got in trouble in Baldwin, I was working in Roosevelt, which was a town next to it, which was a ghetto, and that's where all the action was. So I was in a very quiet county. I was in a very busy village. And then I retired out of the first precinct after working undercover for a year, and then back on 116 because the county ran out of money. And they took all us undercovers and put us right back where we were. But I did love that car anyway, so it really wasn't a hardship.
Yeah.
I really loved being undercover. That's a different story, being a big fish in a small pond, especially in the precinct area.
Well, I think it gave you a little bit more of an opportunity to be yourself.
As an undercover guy, you bet. In fact, I worked on a murder in a bar in the town. See, I couldn't work in Baldwin because everybody in the town knew me. So I worked a couple of towns over, and I was working on a murder that occurred in a bar there. And it was a biker bar. And I had long hair and a red, brown, and black beard. My beard came in 3 different colors. It was pretty cool. Now it's white, as you can see. But anyway, I fit in so well with the bikers and with the waiting staff and the barmaid. I was offered a job to work there.
To work at the bar?
To work at the bar.
Yeah.
And I said, "Hey, Sarge, you got an opportunity to work at the bar?" He goes, "No way." Oh, so that was that.
So you rode bikes back then?
Oh, yeah, I had my bikes. I had a bike from, well, what happened was I went on the academy trip to learn how to ride motorcycles and get my motorcycle license. And that day, I rode the little bikes. They gave us these little 50cc for summonses. You rode these little bikes down. And they showed you how to drive the Cushman, which was like a photo, well, not a photo booth, but a telephone booth on wheels. And then they gave me the 3-wheeled Harley. Mm-hmm. And they had to chase me down and bring me back because I was having too much fun. I was riding all over Mitchell Field, which was the area where we were. And I loved it, man. You talk about bike fever. I went out that night and bought my first bike. And I've had a bike since 1969. Always had something or other.
And you had a bike of kind of a local celebrity there, didn't you? Or
oh, the guy that used to, yeah. Well, there was this guy. When I was a teenager, I'll tell you right the first time I met him. I was walking to school. I got kicked out of 9th grade, so in 10th grade I was going to public school. And I knew this guy, Johnny, and I stopped at his house to head to school, and there was a crazy guy there named Mel Bernstein. And Mel was a hot rodder at the time. He wasn't into bikes, but he did have a 15-speed bicycle with an extended front end that he used to ride all over town. He was from the town next to us, North Woodmere. Anyway, he sees me. I come walking in. This is in, September, I guess. And he sees the jacket I had on, which was a make-believe camel skin jacket, 3/4 length,
Right.
with the barrels for buttons.
Mm-hmm.
They're like root beer barrels for stuff. And he said, "You ain't wearing that." And he took it off me. He was a tough guy with, I think he had 78 tattoos. And he was 21 years old. But he was covered in tattoos. He had a tattoo on his back of a guy riding a motorcycle. And the guy on the motorcycle had a tattoo. So that was Mel Bernstein.
Yeah.
Well, he told me I wasn't wearing that jacket. He ripped it off my back. I didn't wear that jacket anymore. I went from being collegiate, which at my Catholic high school, that's what everybody was, to being a hood,
Yeah.
dressing like a hood. And Mel had a lot to do with that. But that was the last day I ever wore that jacket. And then I had a cooler jacket after that. I don't really remember what I went into, but I just thought that Ken has a leather suit jacket. And I remember in 1969 talking with Naomi, my wife, and she was my girlfriend back then. And I said, I really want to get this black leather suit jacket, but, my parents are going to shit about it. They're not going to like it. And I said, I really, she says, get it. Buy it with your money, and they can't have anything to say about it. And I did. And they didn't. And I wore it, and I loved it. And he's got the same jacket hanging up. It's hysterical.
Oh, that one that you were talking about earlier?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's funny.
Yeah, it is. But, yeah, in the 60s and 70s, I was a fashion plate. I was following Life magazine and Look magazine, and they had all these stories from Carnaby Street in London, and we had going on in like Berkeley area and San Francisco. They had different kind of mod clothing, and that was me. I wanted whatever they had. And there was a store called J.J. Newberry's, and they had a table of all the bell-bottoms, and they looked like what was coming over from London, and they had them all on the table. And I was able to put 3 pairs on in the cloakroom, the try-on room, and out I went. So I was very well dressed. It didn't cost me no tax or anything.
And so I guess kind of becoming a police gave you the alternative of where you were headed.
Well, actually, the store, the better store to steal from was a place called Penny's. In fact, they had shoes for sale. They had boots, those high, they were like desert colored or orangish colored suede boots. And they had the size 6 in the window, but size 10 was, or 9.5, was available to look at. So I took the 9.5, put them in the window, came back later and got them out of the window. So I had those. But Penny's was real easy to take out. We used to steal from all the stores. It was a mall. It was one of the first malls, Green Acres Mall in Valley Stream, New York. And Penny's was about the easiest pickings in the mall. But they had jewelry on a big table. They had, junk jewelry, whatever they call that stuff. And
Costume jewelry.
Yeah, costume jewelry. And there was a nice pair of earrings that was my mother's birthday coming up. And I picked up the jewelry and I put it in my pocket, and I got caught. I'd never been caught. I'd been at it for years. It started in Catholic school with a partner of mine, but it continued until that day. I got caught. I didn't like getting caught. I didn't like it at all, and I never wanted to get caught again. And I might have stole something after that, maybe once or twice, but never.
What worth the risk?
I didn't like getting caught. Yeah. But I was a juvenile delinquent, and I was a big fighter. I thought that I was, that was my idea of fun back then. And what happened was, I got in a fight, and the guy got sent to the hospital, and two suspects, me and this guy Paul, who was in and out of juvenile jail all the time, were named as the perpetrators, subjects we used to call them. And what happened was, that was a Saturday night. I went home, and Sunday morning I got up to go to the candy store, which was our answer to going to church. We used to make believe we were leaving for church and wind up at Stan's Candy Store in the neighboring town, Hewlett. Now, Hewlett was in the 4th precinct. My fight happened in Hewlett, in the 4th precinct. And what happened was, I walked into the stands and everybody said, "Get out of here, the cops were just here looking for you and Paul Tracy." So I left that area and went back to my area, which was the 5th precinct, which was Valley Stream. And I walked up to my house, and there's a 4th precinct patrol car in my driveway. And I said, well, there goes that. I didn't have any money. I didn't have any way to run away and make it work. So I had to face the music. So I go inside, and my father's laughing. And I laugh. Well, why is he laughing? I'm getting locked up, you know?
Yeah.
He was laughing with a guy, and he said, "Eddie, come in here, meet my friend." Helmut Banton, the man's name was. My father was the fire chief at the United Nations. And Helmut Banton was a police, square badge security at the UN. And my father said, "You should work for the county. Let me bring you an application." And he brought him an application to the Nassau County Police. So to pay back, he brought the application for the Nassau County Police for me to take the test. And in my head, I'm like, he's from the 4th precinct. He knows about this fight. But he's trying to get me a badge to get me out of future problems or something. And that's how I got my application.
Changed the course of your life, too.
That's right. And I had and then at the same time, I was going out with Naomi, who I worked with. And she was as straight as an arrow. Didn't drink, didn't smoke pot, did nothing wrong. She was just a good girl. And I was with her day and night, all the time. So I wasn't with my friends, who were at that time getting locked up for drugs, shoplifting, dumb stuff with cars, and drunk driving and whatnot. And they all had records. At that time, they were getting their records, and I was with Naomi. So she kept me out of trouble.
Very good.
And I was investigated by the department at that time, and everything was clean. So I made it to the police department. I was out of high school 3 months, and I was called into the police department. I was 18 years old, and I was the class clown, because it was like going back to 13th grade. And I had more fun than anybody in the police academy. And halfway through, they gave us a test to see how we would do, and I failed. And I said, "Uh-oh, too much fun. I got to start paying attention to what I'm doing."
Studying.
Yeah, and then I did very well at the end. But that was a wake-up call. You can't just play. You're getting a little older now. Mm-hmm. And then they offered the position in the radio room, and my friend, who had already been on the street, said, "You should go to headquarters. They treat cadets good in headquarters, but they're treated like crap. Whale shit, they call us. On the street, you're lower than whale shit." And they were kind of mad at cadets because they were taking the place of the guys who were ready to retire. They were putting a cadet in there at half the price,
right,
for an old timer. So we were loved and hated, but in headquarters, and especially where I worked, they loved us. And we would tell them our weekend stories, and they would relive their youth through the cadets. We were all drunks. We all had great stories. But I lasted 7 years in that crazy place, and it was a great job there, and then a great job when I went on. They called it On the Street. And,
so you worked 7 years in the radio room, and then went out on the street.
I went on the street.
Had your own beat.
Yes,
that you worked.
I started out on a foot post in the town Baldwin, and the guy that was my car operator, he was the nicest man in the world. He took me under his wing, and he was just a perfect partner, and we became really good friends.
Now, Baldwin, that borders with New York City?
Baldwin is the 3rd town past New York City.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's close.
But
it's
yeah,
like
the only way you can tell you're changing city limits is because of the sign.
Oh, yeah.
But it's one constant.
Yes and no. The New York City cops worked a lot harder than the Baldwin cop. And they worked pretty much harder than the ghetto cops in Nassau County.
Mm-hmm.
But I had some guys in the cities, you know, giving me a hard time, and I said, well, where do you work? And the town they worked in was nothing like the town of Roosevelt. But the problem was that if you worked in a place like Sunnyside, which was a real quiet Irish town back then, you kept getting called to Harlem because they ran out of cops. So it didn't matter where you know, you were going to work and learn a ghetto type of, it's a different, completely different. I knew everybody in Baldwin. I used to go to the bars. I used to go to the restaurants. I used to go to the football games. I mean, I knew everybody's kids and everybody in town. I was well loved. I was respected and loved as the cop from Baldwin. I was there 17 years if you add it all up.
Right.
So I did work here and there, but yeah, it was great. But the town of Roosevelt, I tried to make friends with the store owners. Everyone was black, you know, not derogatory. They were just, that's the way it was. That was the town. And they didn't trust us. We were the invading force, the cops. You know, we were the ones that stepped on them and made them stop doing whatever. And they didn't like it. They didn't like us. And me trying to go in there to record store and be friends with the guy.
Right.
Nah, they didn't want any part of it. Whereas in Baldwin, if I walked into the store, it was like, hey, here, got a beer. There's the new Sam Adams. Try it, see if you like it. Okay. You know, I was like, as crazy as I am, and you only know me this way. You should have seen me back then. But I was that crazy on my post. Mm-hmm. And everybody loved it, you know. My bosses sometimes heard stuff and they said, he did what, you know, and I'd have to explain to the captain. Meanwhile, the sergeant and the lieutenant, maybe the sergeant was there, but the lieutenant had been there with me and saw that I used my humor to knock out the problem. You know, these guys were ready to kill each other. I got them both laughing. And the next thing you know, we leave and nobody got arrested. You know, it was the way you could handle situation. Yeah. And the big bosses didn't know about it, but the lieutenants and the sergeants, they would stick up for me. Well, did you hear the whole story? You know, right? And then they get the whole story. They're like, yeah, well, tell them not to do it anymore. Yeah, okay. That's good. Tell me.
That's provided you were on your post.
Oh well, I went anywhere, and I got caught off post a lot, but I used to write the newsletter, which was the PBA newsletter, which was a pretty big publication, considering we had about 3,600 cops, but all the lawyers got it, and politicians, everybody was provided this
newsletter,
PBA newsletter, and I was writing the communications bureau. I called that communications breakdown. That's what I called it. And then I went to the first precinct, and it was Rubber's Rights. It was called Rubber Gun because when you're nuts, they say they take away your real gun and replace it with a rubber gun. So my last name is Gunn, so I was Rubber Gun. When I got caught off post, I was in the precinct. Now sometimes I was caught. I got caught a couple of times in different precincts, different counties. I didn't always live in Nassau County. I had to go home for something. So I had to go to Queens County or Suffolk County to get my stuff and then come back. And sometimes
how do you account for getting a call while you were gone?
I hoped I didn't. And if I did, I was late. Real late to the call. But everybody knew me and everybody was backing up. We backed up each other on everything. I had a call.
Things are a lot different down here.
Oh, yeah. Well, at that time, I'm telling you, we had it where 3 o'clock in the morning, I get a call for a barking dog. All right? I go to the call, never thinking anybody's going to show up. Why would you back a cop up on a barking dog? It was 2 guys in tuxedos playing with a dog and, you know, making them nuts. So I pull in the back and said, hey guys, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. Can you take it easy? You know, maybe. And they want to fight me because they got beer guts, beer, whatever you call it. And I'm like, hey, you know, they're going to fight with me. All of a sudden, 2 cars. I wouldn't have shown up at 3 o'clock in the morning on a barking dog. They were there, thank God, because
you never know.
Stopped the fight, you know, before it started. And they could have let the dog go.
You know, we've had, maybe not back then, but in recent years, a lot of people ambush police officers
Yeah.
and set up, and
Mhm.
so you think you're just getting called to a noise complaint or a barking dog, and you get there and find out that somebody's actually lying in wait for the officers to arrive and ambush them.
Yeah, that was going on, especially in the 70s in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And we were always waiting for it to go over the invisible border line, as you say. The thing with the city was they had so much harder than we did because there was so much more crime.
Mm-hmm.
And they had pockets of really bad places all throughout the whole city. And we had like 3 or 4 that were really problem areas.
Right.
And the rest were great. And some of them were country clubs. I mean, you know, on
Right.
the North
So
Shore.
some of the local bars and all were.
Well, the local bars were usually, there was never a problem in the local bars. We had a place called Nathan's.
That was probably because you knew everybody in the local
Well,
bars.
I never had any problem on Baldwin, but other guys too. The bars were, everybody took care of themselves. If there was a problem in the bar owner took care of it. It didn't usually get to the cops.
Mm-hmm.
If it did, then something pretty big happened. You know, somebody got badly hurt or whatever. But we had Nathan's, which was famous in Coney Island, Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had one in a place called Oceanside. And on Tuesday night, it was bike night. And Mel Bernstein was one of the stars. He had a bike that looked like a dragon.
Oh.
The head of it had a regular motorcycle, a Harley Davidson, and then it had the big tail that came into a head, and it actually spewed fire. He had it set up.
Wow.
Yeah. The dragon bike. He's still known as Dragon Man. But him and his cohorts, Hell's Angels, Pagans, Outlaws, the Breed, they would go there and drink together and then beat each other up. By the end of the night, they had the cops there. And that was the place that had most of the problems.
Right.
And then in August, I think it was, they used to have the Greek gathering, which was all the fraternities would meet at the beach and fight with it. Black fraternities would fight amongst themselves, and if there was a white fraternity, they fought, and that was a big problem. Aside from those problems, we didn't have any mass trouble.
Mm-hmm.
We're in New York City. You had a lot
Right.
of different locations. So we were called the squirrel chasers by the New York City cops, Nassau County, Suffolk County. Well, you squirrel chasers, blah, blah, blah. And again, if a guy from Brooklyn was telling me I'm a squirrel chaser, you're probably right compared to you. I said to one guy one day, I said, you know, I made every arrest that you made. I said, the only difference is I made it once. You make it every other week.
Right, right.
But, yeah, we were good cops. We really were. But the city had a lot more challenge. And their bosses were mean and you know, very strict. Our bosses were great, you know, and the top guys, you know, they were the top guys just like anybody. But the sergeants and lieutenants that I worked with.
Everybody has to answer to somebody, and their jobs and their advancement depended on how well their subordinates stayed in line.
Very true. I had a boss. He was his name was Andy Mulrain. He was nuts as a cop. He made sergeant, nuts as a sergeant, and went all the way up to chief. And every rank, he was the craziest one around. And his father was the commissioner of sanitation in New York City. So he was kind of like given a pass. He'd really get away with murder. And he loved
a lot of union backing.
Oh, yeah. Well, but he loved me because I was like him.
Mm-hmm.
and he covered my ass. He really covered me for some of the stuff. You know, nothing really crazy, but crazy in...
But again, if you're working undercover a good part of your career, you've got to
Well, I did everything
be on the verge.
in uniform that the undercovers would act up. I was only undercover for a year.
Oh.
I was nuts for 24 years.
24 years.
And he was a major part of me getting away with everything.
Well, I think there's a certain amount. You've got to be crazy to do the job.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Just speaking with you over the years, the job here and the job there were you know.
Completely
Yeah,
different.
I used to.
You said you compared it to, was it Barney Miller?
Oh,
The
well,
TV
Barney
show?
Miller TV show was just like the detectives that I hung around with. They had little rooms, and
Right.
they did all the work in that one little room. Well, the detectives, they were all funny. They were big time drinkers.
Mm-hmm.
And if you wanted a detective in the first precinct, was where I worked, you'd have to go to Burke's. It was a bar, and you'd find them there before you'd find them in the squad room. They did all their work in there at Burke's. And we were the best. I mean, you know, you look at the cops from the first precinct, and they all went on to the homicide squad and the robbery squad, because, you know, you learned your stuff over in the ghetto, and you were one of the, you were the best, whether you were drinking or not. Back then, it was like everybody covered for you. You know, you could drink on the job. And when I worked in headquarters, we had a little cylindrical silver ashtray with sand on the top, and you pick up the part that had the sand, and you put ice in a six-pack in it, and you give your calls, and you work your day, and everybody had their little stuff. We had the chilling on the outside window. We had vodka and white wine. I'm telling you, this was 1970 through probably 74, and then we wound up in 75, I believe. They took us out of headquarters and put us under the parking lot in this big war room situation where they had the fire communications and 9/11, which was brand new in Nassau County. And we went from this intricate, wonderful place to this giant place with a bunch of different workers. All female workers came in, and we had beds from in case there was fallout, you know, whatever. They had a fallout shelter down there with beds. So we used to, you know, get an hour off, let's go to bed. But then all of a sudden the girls was going to bed, and the guys, when the girls were in the same bed, and they got caught, and the beds went out. And headquarters was not what it was. But I lasted, like I said, I used to call myself the 20-year radio man. I'm going to be here for 20 years and retire, you know, never see the street. Yeah. Actually, a friend of mine, Eddie London, he was there 20 years. Another friend, Frank Backrash, he came on 3 months after me. He spent 30-some years just in the radio room as a clerk, or as a, you know, dispatcher.
Well, that's not bad. You still get your pension and all, but
he was making overtime more than anybody else, so his pension was better than everybody's. And my friend went there as a sergeant. One day in like October, they said, "You're done. You can't work any more overtime." He said, "Well, all right." You know, he'd already made over $100,000. This is in, you know, 2000, 1990 something. It was crazy to make $100,000.
Right.
But when you're there all the time, it adds up. So then they told him in November, "We need you. You can come back." And he still added on his overtime, and he left with like 115,000. I think he made that year.
My goodness.
I know, it's crazy.
So you retired from the police department there, and then decided to move.
Well, all my vacations were taken with in the back of my mind, where am I going to retire down south? Mm-hmm. I didn't want to stay in New York. I loved New York. I loved my job. I loved my neighborhood. I loved all about it, everything about it. But I didn't want to stay there, grow old or whatever you're going to do. So I said, I want to go down south. So when I went to Florida, I'd look for places, where could I live, you know. It's too hot for my wife. My girlfriend from back then wound up, 20 years later we met, on my post in Baldwin, and we wound up married. And while we were going out, I was ready to retire, and she was ready to do whatever I wanted to, and she was ready to go down south too, so we did. We wound up looking at places, and my sister had a place in Cornelius, in Vineyard Point, and so she was talking about Lake Norman, and we hadn't decided on a place yet, but I was getting ready to retire. This was 1994. So I was ready to retire in 1994. I had 24 years on the job, and Naomi was ready to go. And she said to me, "Doesn't your sister live in North Carolina? Why don't we go there? Check it out." I said, "Yeah, great idea." So we went to Lake Norman. We found a really nice house right off the lake, right on the golf course, Mallet Head Golf Course, and I retired. I talked to my retiree guy, you know, the guy that looks everything up, and he says, well, if you go in June with a little bit of overtime, you can make it work.
Mm-hmm.
And I did. I left June 23rd, 1994. I was here by July 3rd, and that same year, and we lived on the golf course. We were very happy there, but the expansion got crazy. The point was building and building and keep building and keep building. And it was like they were putting 200 houses up or something, and I said, well, that's 400 cars, or 100 houses, 200 more cars coming up the road. So we said,
so only one way in.
yeah, Brawley School Road, that was it, one way in, and we were off. We weren't far enough to the beginning of the road, so we decided to move. And we moved, and we moved, and we moved, and we wound up on a house on the lake, the north end of the lake, which wasn't very traveled. But then everybody moved in with us. We wound up getting my granddaughter living with us, and our son and his then wife, and then my wife's mother. And the house on the lake was big, but the rooms weren't big. Mm-hmm. So we had no room for everybody. So then we moved to Statesville in a big house with big rooms and a bunch of rooms. And we were there for a long time, and just recently we moved to the country in Statesville, where I am now. And we've been very happy here. Been here 31 years in this area, and I've worked for corrections, North Carolina Corrections Department for a little while, thinking that it was going to be like being a cop. Excuse me, being a cop, but it doesn't compare. It's a different job. And I worked for a sadist in my first year there at a big institution, maximum security, Alexander Correctional Center, and then I went. From there, I went to a nice work release where the inmates are good because they don't want to lose their job
And their ability to get out and work.
Yeah, they had breakfast, went to work, came back, had dinner, watched TV, and went to sleep. It wasn't much like jail.
Right.
But they made money, and that all went to the bank except $40. They were allowed to keep $40 a week, which was more than they needed the way they lived. They loved me for some reason. They thought I was crazy.
I don't know where they would have gotten that idea.
I don't either.
Tell us about your music, and how'd you get into playing music?
Well, I guess it started in headquarters, in the radio room. I was sitting there giving calls, and one of my coworkers came from a flea market with 5 harmonicas, and he handed them to 5 of us. And I picked it up, and it had a little booklet. Mary had a little lamb, and where you breathe in and you suck in, and what numbers on the harmonica coincide with the song. And I was like, and a guy Gismondi, his name was Alfredo Gismondi. He says, hey, try that again. He did. He says, try this. And he played the harmonica, and he also played classical music on it. He was really talented. And he saw something in me, and he said, you had it. The other guys, forget, my best friend Fitz, right? He has one. I said, play it, yeah, look, do that. He goes, I said, that's not it. So go along with what you think in your head. Mary had a little forget it, man. He was that bad. He had absolutely no ear for it was like useless. So, but this guy could hear that I was, picking it up. And my mother plays piano by ear. She was very talented too. Anyway, that was then. And I had a friend Eddie that had a band, and I used to get up and play with Eddie every now and then. Then we started a band, and I was the bass player and harmonica player and singer. And my friend who started the band, his name was Larry Zeppernick. So we were Led Zeppernick. And we got one paying job. I don't even know if we got paid in food or I think just food at a bar. That was it. And then that broke apart. And like I said, I'd play with Eddie Hilton a little bit. And then when I moved down here, I just happened to bump into a bunch of people in Mooresville that were playing music. Marie. Mm-hmm. I'd play with Marie every now and again. I'd get up on stage and do a song or two. And then through her, I met numerous guys, and there was a bunch of places in Mooresville, Legends and Java Gyms, and there was a veterans place that used to have Saturday mornings. They used to have from like 10 to 3. You could go up and play bluegrass and country.
Oh, very nice.
And halfway through, the old timers would leave, and the younger guys would come in, and then we'd play the blues and little rock and roll, and it was just a whole group of people that played well together. And then, you know, I got to know this guy and that guy, and I played all over the place with different people. And actually, this guy, June Benfield, who played with the woman I talked about, Marie, when we first met them, June and I played for a summer and made money and everything. It was like, wow, because they knew him. That's why people came to see him. But it was great. It was fun. But through them, then, when I moved to Statesville, they had an open mic in a place called Risto's. And I went to Risto's and with my harmonica, and I said, I play the harmonica, and I would love to play with anybody that wants to play the guitar, back me and play, and I'll help you. Oh, yeah, okay. And then I met dozens of new musicians from Statesville.
Right.
And I played with them all somewhere.
Yeah.
Some Statesville got a lot of places to play, and I had a lot of people. Then I had a band with a duet.
Some excellent musicians around the area.
Oh yeah, there are excellent musicians around this area. But I had a duet with a guy named Scott, and he was a minister. So we called our band Guns and Rosaries. And then he got so busy being a minister that he didn't have time for the band, so that went out the window. That was the last band that I was involved in. But we play Saturdays. My friend Ken here and our friend Pam. It's called Pam and Friends, and we play in a place called the Statesville Historical. See it because
yeah, it's not society. We play there anyway.
We play there, and we know where it is. And we meet there on Saturdays, and we play, and it's just about whatever you feel like playing. Sometimes I do bluegrass, sometimes I do the blues, and Ken does his blues too, and rock and roll. Yeah, we have a good time. Yeah, 2 hours, 10:30 to 12:30. It's always fun.
Well, I'm going to cut this episode of us, and we'll have to come back and talk about some other stories.
Okay, we got them.
Okay.
Good day.
I'm back with Eddie Gunn, and we were just, we started to talk about concerts and things like that, and you were started to tell me a story about getting in to see the Stones, and I stopped you and said, let's do this in recording, because you always have very interesting stories.
Yeah, I've been told. Okay, well, it all started with my friend Rabbit. He had a hot dog truck, we called it, that he converted into a camper. Well, he bought it probably like that, but it was a rat. It, barely ran. And we took it upstate a couple of times, upstate New York, and it got where we had it get.
Yeah.
So he says, all right, we'll go to Philadelphia. We're going to go to the Rolling Stones show. I said, okay, this is like 1980. I'm bad with the date. So anyway, it was actually probably 81, because we went to Live Aid a few years later.
Right.
And we
Now,
was,
did you have tickets to the show, or
no,
you just
no,
got in the van and
yeah,
went?
we were going to get tickets by hook or by crook. And the other part is the Rabbit, Eddie Nakas, he knew the scalpers from Madison Square Garden because he had season tickets for the Rangers. And whenever he had tickets left over, he'd hang out with Horse Teeth and the other scalpers in front of the garden. So he knew all these guys, these guys that were scalpers. So we said, well, we'll get him.
Get tickets, yeah.
Probably not get raped because he knows Horse Teeth.
Right.
So anyhow, that was in the back of our minds. So we drive over to Philadelphia, and we park in the parking lot. And this was Friday night. The shows were Saturday and Sunday. So we got there Friday night, and we found a spot, and we, parked in that spot and mingled. And right behind us was a group from Long Island, like, a couple of towns over from us. So we hooked up with them, we became friendly with them. And we had every kind of opportunity for every kind of drug. Every three cars was a different, pot, coke, ludes, whatever. Every 3 cars, what do you got? Oh, okay.
So you're pretty partied out by the time the show.
Oh no, this was the night before.
This was the night before, yeah.
So anyhow, there was a game at the Spectrum Center. Now, where Live Aid was held was one place, and then the Spectrum Center was right next to it. So this is like a big sports complex. Well, Horse Teeth and them were going to the game, so we decided we're going to go with them to the Flyers game. Yeah, we were like, let's go to the Flyers game. Okay. But it was within walking distance.
Right.
It was, right there. So we wound up in there. And some guy was trying to scalp us tickets to get in. And when we got to the gate, it was free. Thank God the Horse Teeth and them said, no, we're not. So we would have probably, paid. Anyhow, go inside, we're watching the game. And we were so loud and noisy because Ranger fans don't like Flyers. So we were making fun of the team and the audience. There was hardly anybody in there, but it was a preseason type of thing. But we got separated. They didn't throw us out, but they made Horse Teeth and his gang and me and Rabbit had to go to the other side of the
yeah.
So that was the first time we were getting famous. And then we came back and we hung out all night. Like I said, we went from one party to the next, and they had live bands and everything. This was in the parking lot.
Yeah.
It was just great. No cops. Wasn't a cop to be seen. They said, no, thank you. And they just let everything go on. It was pretty much freedom,
Yeah.
So, we partied all night, and I went to sleep. Rabbit took off somewhere. He was within his newfound friends from Long Island and whoever else. So they were all somewhere, and I got a couple hours, like 6 hours sleep, and I woke up and I got up and I found everybody and we partied. And then Saturday night, we had tickets that we got from the scalpers, and we went in, and I think it was George Thorogood and the Destroyers was the opening band. They were great. I'm a blues fanatic, so that was perfect for me. And then the Stones came on, and they put on a really great show. And after all is said and done, we came back and partied, believe it or not. We partied some more. And I fell asleep, and the Rabbit was still out and about. I don't know where he was. And all of a sudden, I guess it's the morning, sometime in the morning, and 3 girls come walking into the trailer, to the hot dog truck. I open one eye, like, maybe I'll pretend to stay asleep, see what this is all about. And the Rabbit was sitting in the, driver's seat. Yay, come on in. Yeah, the shower's working. So he invited people to come in and shower. And we got the show. We got the shower show. So that was fun. It didn't go anywhere, but it was still, better than a sharp stick in the eye, you may say. And so that was that. Then we bounced around, and the Rabbit says, hey, we're running out of beer. We had enough Spam, but we didn't have anything to drink with our Spam Parmesan. So he says, I'm going to the deli. You stand here and don't let anybody take the spot. I said, all right. So him, a couple of Long Islanders, they jump in and they go to the deli. Oh, they were gone forever. And I'm like trying to...
So you're in line?
I'm standing in the spot where the van was.
Oh, where the van was.
And I'm sitting in the, no, you can't come in. People are trying to park there. No, this spot's taken. It's better that he left me, because I had the balls to tell people no.
Yeah.
You left a girl or something like that. Nothing against girls, but it was better to listen to me than to get into the fight. And so anyway, I had the spot saved, and they finally come back, and they're hysterical laughing. Apparently, the Rabbit put on his Rabbit show and made everybody laugh and notice him and be crazy and all. But he came back with a couple of cases of beer. We didn't have to buy them because he went to get them. So we were very happy. Now,
Oh, yeah.
we didn't have a lot of money. So anyway, we're hanging out.
And what year was this? Did you?
I'd say 81 or
Yeah.
I forget. It was a very important concert to them, and Mick
Yeah.
was dressed up like a New York Jet. He was dancing all around in his like football kind of uniform, and "Start Me Up" was the song that started off the show, and it was probably 81's about right. Anyway, we're just hanging out, and I'm like, "How are we getting in?" And then it's like, I don't know, Rabbit already told these 10 Long Islanders he's going to get them into the show. And I don't have a ticket. I don't know how I'm getting in the show either. So anyway, I was so screwed up. It was about 6 o'clock or something. I passed out in the van again. And the Rabbit still, he had about 6 hours sleep in 3 days. I had, every 6 hours I was passing out,
Yeah.
Rabbit was going and going and going. So anyway, he's hanging out, we're all hanging out, and I fall asleep, and him and the Long Islanders now, they got to figure out how they're going to get in. They have no idea how you're going to get 11 people in the stadium for free.
Right.
So I'm laying there sleeping, not worrying about it. All of a sudden, I hear, da-na-na, da-na-na, and I go, ugh. The show started. I slept through George Thorogood and the Destroyers, and I just jumped out of the van, didn't worry about locking it. Boom, and I ran. And I just like a little bowling ball coming down the dip. Get out of the way, get out of the way. And I just kept running, and I didn't get stopped. I went right through the ticket guy, and I wound up into the crowd, and then I remembered the Rabbit had a trick, and it was, get out of my way, I have to throw up. And people just parted like the Red Sea or the Dead Sea, whatever sea it was. And I went right up to the stage, and I was watching the Rolling Stones, and then Mick got up in his cherry picker, and he was right over my head. I'm like, this is great. Anyhow, I'm looking for the Rabbit and the other guys, and I don't see them. I'm wondering if they even got in. They're high order, trying to get these 11 people in. So anyway, the show's over. The show was phenomenal, just as great as the night before. And I'm walking out of the stadium, and I look over to where our van is, and there's the Rabbit dancing on top of the van, screaming, "Neighbors, neighbors, neighbors, neighbors." I walk up, I go, "Did you get in?" He goes, "Yes." I says, "How?" He goes, "The garbage truck went in, picked up the garbage. When it came out, we bolted and we got into the opening that was there." He says, "I got everybody in." I said, you're famous." He goes, "Oh yeah, I'm famous for this one." So anyway, that was the Rolling Stone show. And then we stayed that night, and we partied at every 3 cars. And then Sunday we got up, and the Rabbit, they had porta potties. That was it. And the parking lot was covered with refuse. So the Rabbit said, "I might as well empty the." So he emptied his refuse onto the other refuse and put it back, and off we went with a nice empty van. We get back to the town Baldwin where we lived, and we're just about out of gas. I'm like, I got no money to get gas. Both of us were dry.
Now, Baldwin is like connected to New York City.
Yeah, it's probably 150 miles away from where we were, and we just about made it.
But there's like, it's hard to find a gas station in New York City.
Well, we were on Long Island, so not the
bad.
same story.
Okay.
Not as gas stations all over the place. In the city, you're right, but outside in the Long Island, it's pretty, not every corner, but every third corner on the main road, there's a gas station. But I didn't have any money.
Oh, I
and
see.
We didn't have credit cards then. So we made it around the corner from the apartments that we both lived in. And the car cracked, that was it. We even had to push it to get into the curb. But that was fine.
At least there was a parking space available.
Yeah. So that's the story of the 1981 Rolling Stone show in Philadelphia, told by me.
That's funny.
And it was a great time, a great story. So, jump ahead 4 years. I telling everybody who will listen, I said, I missed Woodstock. I'm not going to miss Live Aid. Live Aid is coming up. I said, there's no way I'm missing this, after screwing up and missing Woodstock. And everybody's like, yeah, man, I'll go, Maybe they'll go, probably not. So that night, my train, the train to Philadelphia comes to Baldwin at 5 o'clock in the morning. The bar I hung out two bars, the Venice and the Irish Pub. The Irish Pub was open till 4:30 in the morning because they used to get the off-duty 4 to 12 cops and the airport workers from Kennedy Airport. So they'd stay open, let them get drunk and
all
go.
the people are serving.
Right? So anyway, the bartender is my girlfriend at the time. And her girlfriend, Rosie, is there, and a rabbit. So we're all sitting there. I says, I'm going, 5 o'clock. You guys want to come? Yeah, we'll come. I said, all right, let me go to White Castle and get us lunch and dinner, whatever. So I went and bought 20, buy the sack White Castle burgers and brought them back. And we got on the train at 5 o'clock, and off we went to Philadelphia. We got there early, of course. And Ronnie and I, my girlfriend Ronnie, I said, I got to lay down. And I laid on the roadway with my head on the curb in this corner where I was hoping nobody was going to run us over. And she's laying next to me. I said, I told you I'd drag you into the gutter one day. So we go to Snipes. We're sitting there. And the rabbit says, I got to get beer. I can't eat this White Castle without beer. I says, all right. So him and Rosie take off, and they go to get beer. Meantime, I go up to the ticket guy. I says, I got $20. I'll give you $20. Will you let my girlfriend and I in? Yeah. Oh, so I paid $20 to see every famous person at the time at Live Aid. So we left. The rabbit can come with his beer, and he'll be fine. He'll drink his beer and then meet us in there, we figured. So anyway, we go to the show. It was unbelievable, Live Aid.
Yeah, it was
Golden
televised.
Stones were there, and Mick and Keith played. No, Keith and Ronnie Wood played with Bob Dylan to end it, and Mick Jagger was with Tina Turner and David Bowie, and it was, for me, that was the highlight. But everybody else was there. U2 was there from London. They had the telecast from London, from I don't know exactly where, but they were filming Abbey Road. No, it wasn't Abbey Road. Some big famous place. At Wembley maybe, and it was being broadcast. So you had that show, and then you'd have the live from America, live from London, live from. It was unbelievable, and everybody was. U2 had their first appearance, and they made it right that day. They were famous from that on, and it was just everybody was in it. Phil Collins played with Genesis or his band, whatever it was, and jumped on a plane and then came to Philadelphia, got off the plane, went to the show, and played drums for the reunited Led Zeppelin.
Oh, wow.
So it was like, Anyway, things happened there that never happened before. It was really something, I was so glad I didn't talk myself out of going, It was just great. I talked myself out of going to Woodstock because I was more a tough guy than a hippie. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have any hippie friends, and I didn't think the hippie movement was for me. So Woodstock was the hippie event. I'm not going here. I had a ride in a car, had a ride on the back of a bike. The bike would have been really good because and it was like 70, 80 miles away. It wasn't a big long thing. I could have done it on the bike, but no. But I kicked myself every day after that. I didn't go, But
it's probably safer the way you went to. Bike might disappear before.
You never know. but Live Aid was quite a great show. I was so happy I did that. Anyway, Ronnie and I walk out, and this rabbit Rose passed out with the beers, left empty beer cans and just laying on the. I says, "You never got in?" "Nah, we ain't go. We could hear it." True.
Yeah.
I says, "Yeah.
At least we went. You know?
At least we went." He says, "You'll never believe this. They remembered me at the deli where I bought the beer." He says, "They remembered me from the Rolling Stone show." I said, "I'm not a bit surprised." The rabbit was one of the funniest people I ever met, and we were soul mates. The minute I met him, it was a good story. I might have told him about that. I thought it was a car getting stolen, but it was a pump action pellet gun.
Mm-hmm.
Did I tell you this?
No.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Now, I was going out with this very wonderful girl, but she had a 5-year-old daughter, this little way overweight, spoiled horribly girl. And I'm good with kids, if the kids aren't little brats. She was a little brat from waking up till she went back to sleep. Now her mother, on the other hand, was the most perfect girlfriend you could ever have. So one day I woke up and it was like, we were together maybe a year. And I lived on the ocean, high rise in Long Beach, Long Island. Yeah, and she drove this Cordoba with the Corinthian leather.
Oh, you did tell me about her. Yeah, okay, yeah.
Anyway, I had to run away. I woke up knowing that I couldn't stand another day with the little kid. Like I said, she was wonderful with the kid. So I said to her, "I can't do it anymore." I said, "My friend Jerry, the owner of the Venice, which was my nutty bar that I lived at when I wasn't home, apartment was being set up above the bar."
Oh, that's perfect living.
Oh, yes. So I said to Denise, I said, "I got a place to go, and I want to go there. I can't do this anymore."
Well, I have to worry about driving that way.
Right. And the station house was right down the street. And so she went nuts. She didn't want me to go, but I said, there's no talking me out of this. I'm going to go. Anyway, I wind up having to live with my parents for a month because the apartment wasn't ready. They were good. They were cool. They didn't bother me. I was able to do my sidewalk act, and they just shook their head. And I wound up, a month later, it was the day before Memorial Day, I moved in. So I'm upstairs, laying in my bed, and it was my window was right on the second busiest road on Long Island, Merrick Road. So, but that's all right.
You get used to it.
Yeah, it was my first night, so it was a little hard, but I'm laying there, all of a sudden, I hear this click, 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 click. I'm like, there's a guy. And now, I'm the cop in this area.
Yeah.
And I know there's a guy with a mechanical thing that they would stick in the keyhole.
Slapjacks.
Yeah, and pull it back and forth, and then you pull the
lock
out,
yeah.
and you can get into the car. So
It's like a drill bit. They screwed into the lock.
Yeah.
And then it was actually a wheel puller, is what they have, with a weight on it, and it hits a metal plate back here, and it slaps. So if you've got the clamp on there, you can pull a brake wheel off or something like that. With this thing, it just pulls it straight out. But they put a nail in there, or a drill bit in there, so you screw it in to the lock, and then when you slap the thing out like that, it just yanks that lock right out of the door.
Okay, well, there's a guy doing this in my neighborhood.
So I heard.
Yeah. We weren't always cops. So as it turns out, I hear this, so I said, "Oh man, that's the guy. I'm going to get him." So I threw my clothes on, put my gun in my pocket, put my badge in my pocket, handcuffs over here, and I went downstairs to apprehend the car thief. And I look in the street, there's no cars, there's nothing. And I know it came from the front, not the side or the back. And I was like, where the hell is this guy? And then I hear it, and I look next to me, and in the doorway is the rabbit and this guy Joey. Joey was he was a returning vet, and he was nuts. Good guy, nuts.
Oh yeah.
He was the dishwasher.
This is
trying to find-
This is during the Vietnam.
It was after Vietnam,
Vietnam.
but he had, I don't know if he served a little in Vietnam. It was around that time, but he was cuckoo anyway.
Yeah.
And he's got a bottle of vodka. I had just met him like that day, you know, and we were talking and stuff like that. And, you know, but I didn't know the rap. This guy's got long, stringy, blonde hair, and they're drinking a bottle of vodka, and they got a gun. You know, I don't know, it's a pellet gun yet, you know. And I'm like, hey, what do you got there? You know, and I took the gun. And they're like, give me that fucking thing, grab it. Who the fuck are you? I says, I'm Eddie. He said, Eddie, I'm Eddie. I said, oh, Eddie Rabbit.
Yeah.
So we shake hands. Right? So anyhow, turns out Jerry, who owned the Venice, who was a friend of mine, told them to kill all the pigeons that were going between the buildings from this side,
like pellet gun.
this side of Merrick Road to this side, so I don't have to deal with them. They won't be coming in.
Right.
You know, they've been living there for the whole time they were building.
Right.
So they've killed a bunch of pigeons, and they're laying in the road. So I was like, all right, okay, want a drink? I had been in AA. I'd smoked a little weed, but I hadn't had any drink in 3 years.
Wow.
So I move over
And
a bar.
You're moving over a bar.
And all the AA guys are like, you know, they're going to have you drink a beer before you have them drinking Coke. I said, yeah, I don't think so. I'll be fine. No, I wasn't.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, all right, I'll take a swig of vodka. So that probably started the boat rolling again. So I go back upstairs, shaking my head, laughing at my new friends, Eddie Rabbit and Joe. And I'm laying in bed, go to sleep. All of a sudden, I hear music. I'm like, what the? And I get up and I look out the window, and going down Grand Avenue and on Merrick Road are the bands. It's Memorial Day. I forgot. It was the night
so you
before
have
Memorial.
the
So that we had a
parade.
big parade in town. It was a big deal. And I used to lead it with the patrol car and stuff. So I was like, oh, I'm going to know everybody in there. So I put my clothes on and I go down. And there's Eddie Rabbit. And he's got a leash. And attached to the leash is not a cat, not a dog, but a rabbit. I says, hey, Eddie, how you doing? We shake hands. I says, what's with the rabbit? He goes, that's Razzie Rabbit. I said, Razzie Rabbit. He goes, chick magnet. I said, oh, girls come up, oh, you cute little rabbit. And he had it, like when a girl met him, they were stupefied. He wasn't that great looking, but he was cool. And he had it, you know what I'm talking about. So, yeah, and he had the rabbit too. So he had the rabbit, that's it, and he was getting his action every minute.
How he got his name?
Well, I gave him the name when I met him that
see.
day. He was just Eddie, but I named him Eddie Rabbit, and it stuck. Anyway, we were hanging out watching the parade, and it really hadn't started. You could hear the music, but no marching bands were
Haven't
there
gotten
yet.
there yet.
So they're marching along, we're watching. All of a sudden I look on the roof, and there's Joe in his camo with a floppy hat, looking like that, but floppier, and that damn rifle, the pellet gun, where he's shooting them, you know, he's got that on the roof. I'm going, Christ, I'm like, Joe, get down there before somebody calls in a sniper. Yeah, okay. You know, so he comes down. Me, him, and Rabbit are standing watching the parade. And how far can I go where I can just walk right here? Will I be able to be seen? All right. So the paraders are coming down Grand Avenue. And all of a sudden, the whole band sidestepping pigeons.
You got about 50 pigeons in the middle of the road.
Merrick Road, Grand Avenue, was nothing but dead pigeons on the ground. So I was like, oh my God. All of a sudden the cops come boom, 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 from all over the place, right? And I'm like, oh shit. My friends, you know, responding to a sniper. A helicopter flying overhead. Joe splits. He goes in the back, takes off his camo jacket, hides that, starts washing dishes like he's working.
Yeah.
Puts the gun against the door jamb, and he's this far away from it, and he's washing dishes, and I'm standing back, like in the doorway of the kitchen by the bar, and I'm watching the show, you know.
Yeah. I don't know nothing.
no, I was just watching. And this guy Tony comes in, this cop Tony. He's like, "You know anything, Gunn? You know anything about what's going on?" I says, "Nah, what are you doing here? What's with the helicopter?" "There's a sniper right on the top of your building." I says, "Oh my God, that's awful." And Joey's, watch this. And Tony walks right past the gun and never sees it. Joey takes it, shoves it in a little, shelf or something under there, right? And goes back to washing dishes. They were asking all these questions. Nobody's going to say anything. So anyway, the rabbit, in the meantime, he says he was pissed off at Joe because the helicopter scared him to death. He was in the shower and the helicopter's right above it, making the whole place shake. He's like, I didn't know what to do. Anyway, in the meantime, everybody at the parade's going to the Venice for a beer or pizza. They had the best pizza in the world. Or lunch, it was lunchtime. So the place was packed with people. And Jerry had a cat named Buttons, but he called him Buttons. Buttons was walking around. He was, you'd see him at the bar, you'd see him in the kitchen, you'd see him in the dining room. He was everywhere.
Ran the place.
Yeah. So he's walking around also. He goes outside. Now Joey had taken a pigeon and ripped the head off, and he had the head sticking here, and he was petting it, and he'd go up to girls, "See my pigeon, isn't it beautiful?" And they'd say, "Oh," and he'd open it up, and it was a severed head, right? So he was blowing everybody's mind, right? So where's the body? Buttons got the body in his mouth,
carrying
all through the dining room, jumping up on the tables. Hello.
Yeah.
Jumping up, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Jumping up on the table, swinging the damn body all over the place. So that was Memorial Day in Baldwin.
Oh, Baldwin.
My first Memorial Day, living above the Venice.
Well, I guess we ought to call this one a day.
Okay.
My battery-operated light has decided to die on me, and so this probably isn't too far behind it.
Okay. All right.
They're good stories.
See ya. There's probably a rule of thumb that I don't ever follow rules of thumb or rules in general. But the rule of thumb is don't live near the station house.
Yeah,
and don't live near the station house for 3 years when you're drinking every day. And then sobering up enough to go to work, and then coming back, and the stories of what's going on right down the street are getting back to the bosses. But my boss was
not a
cuckoo head, so he
Yeah.
understood me. But that was a big rule of thumb that I never got through the head.
We had talking about going to see bands and things like that. One of the crazy things, the Robert Cody band that I was managing for a while in Orlando, they had this long stretch at the El Morocco Hotel in the bar there. Lonnie's girlfriend was a bartender there, and he ended up moving in after his divorce to the hotel, and they ended up hiring him as the maintenance person for keeping things going. So they had a long-standing gig there at the bar there.
Okay.
They no longer had the tour bus, but one of his running jokes was the tour bus is broken down and we're temporarily stuck here. And so the band played there for probably about 8 months, And but it was a good gig. But one night, usually ended about 2:00 in the morning, and at like 6:00 in the morning, I think it was, they were having a space launch, one of those moon launches.
Oh,
and,
wow.
So it was the huge rocket, the Atlas, I think it was.
Yeah.
But
I watched it on TV.
it was nighttime, and it was the first one that was going to be going up in the darkness.
Okay, I remember.
So we got done with the show, and we all decided to pile into his car and our van and drive to the beach to go see this thing. Well, Highway 50 runs from Orlando straight to Cocoa Beach.
Okay.
And it was, back then it was just a 2-lane road. Two lanes in each direction, I'm sorry. But two
Okay.
lanes here and 2 lanes
Mhm.
coming back. And we got probably halfway to the beach, and traffic was dead stopped.
Everybody wanted to see it.
Everybody was going
To see it.
to see it, and so we are 25 miles from the beach, and we're just sitting there in dead traffic. And so we sit there for a while. Now everybody has fallen asleep except for me and Lonnie. And Lonnie's driving. Tim, there goes the other light.
There goes the other light.
So Lonnie is driving, and we're sitting there, and he said, you know, there hadn't been any vehicles coming the other way
Good
the whole
thinking.
time we were sitting there.
Oh no.
So he goes across the median into the oncoming lanes of traffic.
Which, thank goodness, there weren't very few.
There was nobody.
Nobody.
We drove for 25 miles
I never saw
the
it.
wrong way on the highway.
In a bus or in a vehicle?
This
In a
was
car?
this was in a van,
Oh, okay.
and everybody's sleeping, and I'm sitting there just, you know, like
Praying.
praying, yes, because, and we drive all the
Oh.
way to the coast where A1A is, and we get about half a mile from A1A. Now we've passed 100,000 vehicles
Wow.
at least that were stopped. We get down there about a half mile from the A1A, and he turns the van around and parks it facing that way so that we'll be ready to go out. And we walked down the road to the beach
Oh, that's
and got there in time to see the launch, and got down to T-minus 5 minutes, and they canceled the launch.
Oh no.
But everybody was going, how did we get down here? You don't want to know.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
But
We did some crazy stuff and lived through it.
Oh.
I mean, we lived through it, but a lot of our friends didn't make it.
yeah, there was definitely lucky to be here.
Oh yes, I agree.
Well,
Great. Thank you.
enjoyed it, Eddie.
Enjoyed it too.